The Agentic AI in DevOps with you another week with Andrei, Vladimir, and Fernanda. And today we are talking about second brain. Would it be nice to have a second brain so you could do more stuff with it in DevOps, including DevOps? What do people mean when they say second brain? People who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I can share a little bit of my experience with this idea of a second brain. So over time, as you learn things, if you try to hold everything in your head, it's natural that you start to either forget things or not being able to connect things, right? Because you keep like loading information. And you can think like if you try to contextualize in DevOps, there are all these tools and different ways to do things, and you keep seeing new ways to do things. And it's very difficult sometimes to connect that with things you have seen before. So with the idea of a second brain is that you always create kind of a note, or you put somewhere outside of your head into something that you can go back to later, and then do this review basically, right? Where you can find connection points between things that you learn that you wouldn't make in your head upfront or on the fly, right? So for me, I started doing that. And before it was very difficult to be disciplined with this because you needed to write notes and then you go back to those notes and you're like, what was it that I was writing here again? Like, what did I mean? And now it's easier, right? With AI, even if you do second brain in general. So there very big schools, let's say, of people who follow this. With Thiago Forte, right? Like there are different people talking about it in a different context. But today we wanted to talk how you can use those same principles to speed up your work with DevOps and increase the quality of what you're doing. And that's kind of my take on a second brain. So a way to download stuff from your brain so that you can go back to it later.
It would be your take, Vladimir.
The second, it's a constant. People are constantly changing the systems for second brain in the past. You probably notice that people are moving between the different note-taking apps, Apple Notes, Evernote, Obsidian. I think we can easily name 50 to 60 different apps for saving the notes. Maybe not anymore, because everything is just a markdown file now sitting in your file system, which is quite simple system, I would like to say. And it's allow everyone to spend time on actually writing the notes, not learning the tools, which is hard. Really write this.
One thing that I want to bring here is the fact that the ideas Fernanda mentioned is not new. There were people advocating for the second brain or having those systems of records where you collect the knowledge and then you have a catalog of that knowledge so you can easily recall. I think recalling in the past used to be the hardest part of it, since when you're collecting the knowledge, it comes as unstructured stuff. So you would just jot down something, drop it into your notes, and then never read it again. Because you don't have a good way of systemizing it. So like you need to prune and systemize, summarize, and then being able to recall. So building that system used to be quite hard. But I should say that to the companies where I was involved in the hiring, that would be one of my questions that I would ask people during the interviews. Are you taking notes? What's your system of taking notes and like recalling it? Because that tells you quite a lot about the person and how organized they are, what they want from life. Because if person is taking notes and he has a system, that's a different level of organization comparing to person where information flies in one ear. Maybe it makes some contacts with the nerves in the brain and then it flies out to another ear. If you see what I mean.
No, definitely, yeah. Because having the discipline to take the notes in a way that they are useful, right? It was quite difficult. So definitely true. I used to ask similar questions, and then you see that for the people who are writing down and kind of sometimes just downloading their way of doing things, they learn faster, right? And find ways to say like, actually, I did something before, because also just the fact Now we don't write, we type, but just the fact that you try to record that in some way helps you solidify that in your mind, right? So it's a good one indeed, regardless, right? If you use it for personal life or for work, it's a good
So
habit.
if you had it, like if, for instance, if you're making the journal, like if you're journaling on a regular basis and writing down your thoughts, or if you have a note, you're actually much better positioned for AI than other people, since you can then use AI to try to process them and structure them and extract insights and maybe build something that would be acting very close to how you would act, or you can try to talk to yourself. That would be quite fascinating. I could get like a first-hand experience of trying to argue with myself and be in the shoes of my wife, for instance, for a second. But jokes aside, it kind of goes to the same narrative. We've been our episode on skills, because if you haven't been doing nodes before, with skills, that's basically what you start doing, right? So you start to write down instructions of how you do stuff or how to accomplish something. That's just another kind of node that's being stored in a certain storage system, which is the plugins and so on. But it could go, those are explainers of how to do things, but they also might contain the knowledge about stuff that you interface with. And that's kind of what brings us to the DevOps applications. When you are, as a DevOps engineer, you are a help desk for your developers in many ways. Since knowing where the stuff is quite often in a short supply, I would say. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of people who worked with infrastructure would relate, where like the developers would come and ask, like, where is this thing? How does it work? Where it was deployed? When it was deployed? Can AI answer those questions? Yes, it can. If it would know where you have it, because otherwise it would need to go out and rediscover it again and again. So here we're coming to the idea of the second brain. Quite often the second brain is being mentioned in terms of your life, your personal life. But here you could be thinking of building a second brain for the stuff you work with, like the system of reference for everything you work with.
And that can make a huge difference also, not just for speed, like Andre mentioned, right? The AI would have to go and rediscover things, but also stories that we hear online, for example, oh, AI deleted my database, right? We touched on this on previous episodes. And this is just brought back to my mind the idea that even if you think on DevOps and infrastructure, on something running on AWS, for example, if you want AI to go and rediscover like your local agent, Cloud Code, Codex, whatever you use, you need to give it credentials, right? And there is where it starts the problem, that you might give credentials that what you can do, and then is the danger zone, right? So there are different ways, and that's why we were like there. How can we make this better, safer, and in a way more efficient as well, so that you don't need to go and rediscover every time, right? Because then you're gonna do a lot of API calls and things like this, and maybe run into hallucinations because AI gives up on issuing the API calls that just come up with something. So there, I think this efficiency, but also the security aspect of doing it in a different way.
Right. This is basically where we spent quite a lot of time with B.O.R.I.S. As people know, like we're building the system, get B.O.R.I.S.ai, and in many ways, that system actually acts as a second brain for your AI agents. Like if you plug it in through MCP server, for example, then the Cloud Code, Codex, whatever you have down there, Kilo, open code, I can continue, but I probably shouldn't, will be able to pick up the knowledge it needs through the MCP based on what is it working on. And this is an important moment here, because we spoke about that, right? So like with the context window, see the previous episode on the context windows, the tools, the skills, the system prompt, all of that eats the useful context windows that you have to work on the task at hand. So if you don't have any system of reference, then you spend all of that rediscovering where things are, using the context window instead of preserving it and spending the useful intelligence on the task at hand. So that's like the first problem. But there is actually opposite side of this problem is the system you have. I mean, like if you're doing your personal project in the cloud, not that many things you have there. And those you can maybe save into a single MD file and be done with it, right? So my AWS account is this, region is that. I have Kubernetes cluster with this. Done. But if you have multi-account organization with multiple workloads, multiple business and product lines, of stuff in there, that will be one big fat empty file. Again, if you take all of that, load it into the memory, yes, your agent now knows everything, but does it need to? Probably not. So that's another problem. So first is getting the context the agent needs, but also getting the relevant context for the task at hand. So one, you have knowledge acquisition. Remember us writing down our notes, but then knowledge recall in an efficient way. And people been running around talking about RAG, Retrieval-Augmented Generation for 4 years now. That was a holy grail of business intelligence systems. We're just gonna put all your documents in the vector database, and then we're gonna do a context search over it. Yes, that kind of helps. It's better than nothing, but you really need to have a better understanding of how things else are connected. And RAG alone doesn't solve it.
Yeah, this thing with the relationship, right? It's is one of the big, let's say, one of the gaps of the pure RAG that we are used to with this idea of documents, and especially if you think on infrastructure, right? If you want to say, for example, I'm going to change this security group, let's put in the context of AWS, and you want to change it like a networking rule. What is the impact? What's going to be, what traffic goes through this? If you just say on a RAG, like I have this security group and these instances and this, and I'm going to change, you're not easily able to understand the impact. So all of this is what we also learn with experience, because we also started with the pure RAG, and then you do more, and then you're like, But now if you want to talk about blast radius, then this is not so useful. So you need something that will say with the graph, for example, so you connect things. So that's to say that sometimes we have talked to people like, oh yeah, this makes sense, but isn't it simple to build? And actually, if you want to do it properly, it's not that straightforward, right? Because there is a lot of these things. And as Andre mentioned, in big environments, you can have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of resources. So do you need everything? And what is, again, the relationship between these things? Which in the end, I think is one of the big values of DevOps engineers, right? In your head, you're kind of able to say like, hey, but if we touch these, there's all of these other things that I already know that are going to be impacted. And many developers or people that are not into the infrastructure, they only see their little piece, right? And it's like, I'm deploying my new application here, but I have zero idea on downstream or upstream applications or components that might get impacted. So just to say that RAG pure, it doesn't help in what we do, right? So
Well, it helps, but it stops short from what you might need really to actually be useful, because as you mentioned, the RAG is flat. You need to have dependencies, so you need to have a graph. So ideally graph RAG. Then there is also a temporality aspect to that. So what been true today might not have been like that yesterday. And if you need to argue about the system, you also need to have aspect of a way to represent change over time. There is this, and then finally, you have the knowledge system, but every database would have an issue of staleness. So this is where another aspect of temporal dimension comes in play. You need to find a way to do the context recall augmented based on the current time frame. So you might have stuff in your database, but if the question is about right now, then you cannot 100% trust what you have in database because it could be stale already. So then you need to have a hybrid recall where you actually are augmenting the data stored in your context system with a live data layered on top. So you have to like revalidate the data on the fly. There is like a bunch of stuff that's in there, like the problems when it comes to building those second brains. And we just happen to be building one that's dealing with the engineering systems and connects the dots between different engineering systems, like your source code to what is running in the cloud, to what people discussing in the Slack, for instance. That's a funny problem to work. I mean, like it's was keeping me up at night. Product monitor during the weekend, but I do like the problem space. And I also should say is that really where we started was different. Like if you have seen get.boris.ai site before June 5th, 2026, it was the same, but like maybe by the time you listen, it's actually going to change. There, we've been like focusing on applying this knowledge, this context layer to the DevOps application as a DevOps agent, like trying to build our replacement as DevOps engineers. And we realize that in the current environment of today, the way things look, everyone is a builder, and I don't think people are after solutions in a 2026. I think people more after, let us build it. We want to build it ourselves. So we're focusing on actually giving the knowledge they need to build whatever they want to build, and just like using that knowledge as a utility, as a piece of infrastructure, rather offering them the ready-to-use solution that we think they need. That's why we actually today talking about context layer. It's been there all the time. It was
It
just
actually already exists for all the documentation which agents use. When you want to write a Java app, you ask some Spring framework. When you want to write a Node.js app, you ask another framework. So this is a public available information. But what's about information from your private information systems? There's no solution.
at least that's what we are aware of.
Yeah, but I
Nice.
believe, people are building. Everyone is a builder, as Andreas mentioned. But with the B.O.R.I.S as a context, with our context layer, you at least don't need to grab all the sources which we provide you. So you don't need to start from the scratch, because some systems are already provided as knowledge layer. And another problem which you may face in the future is how to actually map the systems all together, because maybe something appear in one system, how to log into another one. According to this databases or the stale information, I would like to add a bit of a thing that some information may need to be retained, like as how the things need to be done, how we work, what are the principles inside the organization, like as what's the guidelines for the code, for example. I don't know, whatever people have inside their organizations. But at the same time, another pieces need to be reviewed, like it's annual review of infrastructure before the audit, for example. You have to renew it every year. So it's a lot of dimensions inside all of these graphs and a database, which need to be all likened together if you like to build, say, a similar system yourself.
By the way, it's not on the website that is different. The B.O.R.I.S itself is changing because the B.O.R.I.S acronym, it's not the B.O.R.I.S Boris Grishenko in a golden eye. movie. It's a good movie, but it is not as good to call the person after, the product after that fictional person. We
How to say, you mentioned as people are asking around, right? In the beginning, people are asking someone where the stuff. But I usually notice that in an organization, people ask someone who worked the longest time.
Yes.
It could be anyone. It could be a CTO, developer, infrastructure guy, just someone who is from the beginning, from the elder guy with all the knowledge. It's kind of natural for humans, right? In the past, to ask someone with more experience because they just stay here longer.
But let me come back to the acronym of B.O.R.I.S.
Okay.
Because it's not only websites that are changing, but also acronym. And today, June 5th, 26, it stands for Base of Record for Intelligent Systems. So it basically captures the idea of the context layer as a base of record for intelligent system, assuming that intelligent systems consume those records, those nodes.
Yeah,
just wanted to finish it.
It's nice that the acronym worked for the previous goal, and now it also works for the next one, right? So as the
It
product
is how it
evolves,
is with acronyms. You come up with it first, and then you pull the meaning after.
and then you try to make it fit, right?
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
curious, for something I think you mentioned as well, Andre, before, and what you guys think, in the, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago or something, or maybe even last year, there was this whole idea now with this AI coding agents, the demand for software developers, more in particular, is going to go down, right? And then when you see people talking around, what I saw, people discussing, is that actually it was the opposite, because now the cost to develop software has gone down so much that a lot of companies and people now want to create their own custom software, right? So, but still, even though these coding agents can do a lot of the work, sometimes people are like, yeah, but I need someone who at least has some knowledge of it, right? Which actually means that all of these, the cost of software has gone down, which means more companies and more people want to have software. And if you think on the DevOps side, this is where the software needs to run somewhere, right? And then most of the time, these coding agents are good at writing code, but when it comes to deploying the infrastructure and building something that these apps can actually grow, they are not that well prepared. So thinking about this, being a DevOps engineer, if you say, hey, I want to be an independent engineer and consult for companies, if you have something like B.O.R.I.S, for example, a knowledge base that understands the environment of that particular customer, right? And it helps you manage that infrastructure with a lot less overhead. It means that now you can support all of these new sort of software companies that are going to come up and expand your reach much more, right? By saving a lot more of your time rather than trying to figure out every environment manually, especially because, like we said, some of these environments can be quite large. And instead of spending time trying to build your own custom thing, you can try to use something like B.O.R.I.S, for example, that will already have the baked in knowledge of years of consulting into what to bring in. And then you can use whatever coding agent you want, right? But my question or interesting thing to hear from you guys is this: the expectation was less opportunities, but I hear things here and there that actually is going in the opposite direction. There was a dip in the big companies, but there is a growing demand on the smaller ones that now want to have their own thing. I don't know if you guys have heard or seen anything in that direction.
Yes, so there are a few things. I don't have a direct answer from this, really, but there are a few trends in the news that people can use to infer the answer. So few trends now is that token maxing times seems to be past us. So I can see that most of the tech companies starting to stop using those token usage leaderboards and actually scaling down emphasis on that significantly.
Now it's a budget per person, like this
Yes.
amount per month per person.
Yes. So
max cap, basically.
for instance, it was in the news that Uber introduced a cap of 1,500 a month per person. And it looks like everything starts to stabilize, because before that, it was like hype, go, boil the ocean, spend as much tokens as you can. Now it's just becoming like a tool as any other tool that is available to software engineers with its budgeting limits. And in my feeling, it's kind of becoming like a perk you have, right? So like you join this company, you could be writing manually, or company provides you with access to the subscription, which could be a high. And you kind of still writing the code, but you just a little bit a person while doing that, because let's admit, writing code is draining. I mean, it is mentally, cognitively a hard thing to do. You have to work your brain quite a bit.
Yeah, it's like a perk. It's a good analogy what you make. It's like this, laptop thing for work, a tool which you need to do your job maybe more efficient way. Yeah, and I think maybe it's my speculations, my own speculations again. The talking maxing was a bit related to IPO of both companies, which we are now quite fast filling all the documents. That's what I also noticed. So it's faster, but I'm curious, like, as how it's gonna move forward. Maybe all of these local LLMs will a bit stand out, because in the past it make no sense at all. I just get the subscription and unlimited amount of tokens for the public LLM. But the local models maybe will a bit stand out. I'm still experimenting, even if I'm running on a bit older MacBook, but still. So it's maybe will make a bit more sense in the future.
Yeah, it looks like at least some of the software engineers staying around. That
Yeah.
probably will be a safe statement to make. Some of them going to stay around.
You know how to say, every technology opened in a bit of a new market. So if everyone is a builder now, how many software all of these people will build? And who gonna deal with all of this half-done SaaS-y thing on the market?
Yeah,
So one has to solve it.
eventually, like you build it like in Replit, for instance, but in order to make it real, I mean, like it's gonna, for MVP, Replit is totally fine. Lovable for MVP, totally fine. Yes, but eventually you need some custom features, you need some custom security, compliance, blah, blah, blah. And then you are moving to cloud, and someone needs to move it, someone needs to build it, someone needs to manage it. Could be done with the local agents. I'm pretty sure hyperscalers will provide more and more offerings in that. But at the moment, like there is still needs someone who is in charge of decision making and steering the course. So the legwork could be done by no problemo, but you cannot outsource decision making.
You can say we need to blame someone. We need the person to blame. Someone need to be responsible basically for the decisions which they make. It can be, it's our AI agent decide to tweak the database that way. There should be someone.
Well, not blame, but someone needs to be responsible. And I recently listened, the Pragmatic Engineer podcast, and they had a founder of Open Code in there who had a very balanced view on AI and how it is and how it is to build the software to their results. If you are like the pure software engineer, like building software, like not exactly infrastructure. It's kind of applies because we still do a lot of infrastructure as code, and we need to understand the architecture of software to do it efficiently. But I would recommend finding that episode and listening it as an answer to the Fernando's question.
Nice.
All right. On 30 minutes, how about we wrap it up and get one step closer to the weekend?
Yes.
For those of you who are actually listening as we publish during the weekend, well, we wish you an enjoyable weekend. Thank you for tuning in, and we're going to hear each other next week. Thank
Yeah.
you.
See you next time.
Bye.
Oh,